Some stories are too painful to hear, but even more painful to live. What you're about to listen to is the confession of a woman who trusted her pastor and his wife, only to be used by both of them in ways that left her spiritually scarred, emotionally drained, and physically broken. This isn't just about abuse. It's about manipulation wrapped in the language of God. It's about the silent bondage happening behind church walls, and why many people no longer trust the altar they once wept at. Listen closely. Because this story may sound extreme, until you realize how many people are quietly living it right now.
If I had known the price I would pay for trusting them, I would have walked out of that church the day I first stepped in. But when you're broken, confused, and desperate for God, you can't always see the trap wrapped in a prayer. I came to that church after life had already beaten me down. My mother died when I was 16. My father blamed me for everything. My siblings distanced themselves from me because of some things that happened in the family I won't even speak about right now. I carried shame like skin, I wore it every day. But I still had one thing left, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, God could fix me. Use me. Heal me. I was looking for healing, for guidance. And when I met the pastor and his wife, they welcomed me like I was their own daughter. You see, the day I walked into the church, it wasn't even a service day. I was just passing by, and I felt something telling me to go inside. They were having a small prayer meeting. And that was the day I met her, the pastor's wife. She came straight to me like she had been waiting. She hugged me, told me she saw fire in my spirit. Said God had shown her I was special. She spoke so gently. So motherly. I cried in her arms that day, real tears, the kind I hadn't let anyone see for years. Within weeks, I was being invited to their house. She would cook for me, give me clothes, and tell me she wanted to disciple me. She called me daughter. The pastor was kind too. Always respectful in the beginning. He would check on me. Pray over me after service. Sometimes lay his hands on me during deliverance. They both made me feel seen, like I finally mattered. And I did everything to please them. I cleaned the church. Joined the choir. Attended all-night vigils. I wanted to grow. I wanted God. And they said I was chosen. But looking back now, I realize I wasn't chosen for the altar. I was being groomed for their bedroom. It didn't happen all at once. That's the scary part. It started as love. As mentorship. As you're special to us. I didn't know I was being drawn into a trap I wouldn't easily escape. The first time something felt strange was when she asked me to start sleeping over at their house, even when there was no program. She said I needed spiritual covering. Said she wanted to keep me close. But I didn't know that the more time I spent there, the more they were watching me. Studying me. Setting me up. You see, when you trust someone as your spiritual covering, you don't expect them to undress your soul just to take advantage of it. But that's exactly what she did. And it started with something as innocent as a back rub. It was on one of those nights I slept over at their house. The pastor had traveled, and I was helping her prepare for a church women's event. We had prayed together, laughed together, even fasted together that week. She told me I was like the daughter she never had. And I believed it. I didn't question her hugs. I didn't question her late-night conversations. I thought it was love, God's kind of love. That night, I was lying in the guest room. She walked in without knocking and sat on the bed beside me. She said she could see I was tired and offered to rub my shoulders. I hesitated, but she insisted, said I shouldn't be shy around her. That's how it started. Her hands stayed too long. They moved too slowly. I didn't know what was happening. I was frozen. Confused. But I didn't say anything, because I thought maybe this was still part of her affection. Then she kissed me. At first, just on the cheek. Then it moved to my neck. Then my lips. My brother, my body didn't even move. Not because I liked it, but because my soul shut down. Because this was the woman who said she was my spiritual mother. Because I didn't want to disrespect her. Because part of me thought maybe I had done something wrong to make it happen. She told me not to be afraid. That it was okay. That spiritual intimacy sometimes manifests physically. That God had joined our spirits, and that closeness was normal. I cried in the bathroom after she left. But the next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Gave me breakfast. Prayed for me. Hugged me in front of the other church workers. And so I said nothing. I buried it. And I kept going back. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to leave. I felt trapped, not in her house, but in her love. Or at least what she said was love. Over the next few months, the intimacy became regular. Hidden. Secret. Tied up in prayer and shame and silence. I stopped hearing God clearly. My dreams became filled with shadows. I was battling deep confusion, a heaviness I couldn't explain. But every time I tried to pull away, she would call me a daughter again. She would cry and say God had joined us. That it was covenant. And I was too scared, too bound, too broken to challenge her. And then one day, the pastor returned from his trip. And a new chapter of my torment began. I was already damaged. Confused. Bound to something I couldn't explain. But when he came into the picture, it was like my soul was divided in two. The first time he called me to his study, I thought it was for prayer. He said, "My wife told me you've been going through some spiritual attacks." I just nodded. Because how could I explain what she had been doing to me? He held my hands and began to pray. But this prayer felt different, it felt like a performance. Like he wasn't praying for me, but over me. He started talking about how God sometimes binds leaders to their spiritual daughters for divine transfer. He said that I carried something powerful, but it needed to be unlocked. And then he said something that shattered me. My wife has already started the process. You're not just any church girl to us. You're chosen. That moment, my spirit wanted to run, but my body couldn't move. He came around the desk. Touched my shoulder. Stroked my hair. I froze again. He said, "Don't be afraid. There's no sin when a spiritual connection is this deep." I wasn't raped violently. I wasn't dragged to the ground. But I was spiritually coerced. Silenced by authority. Bound by shame. And broken by two people I once called spiritual parents. After that day, I became a secret. Not a daughter. Not a disciple. Just a body passed between two leaders, both calling it covenant. Both telling me it was God's will. Both laying hands on me in church, while laying hands on me in the dark. I stopped singing in the choir. I stopped praying with fire. I felt like I was dying from the inside out. And worst of all, I couldn't tell anyone. Because who would believe me? They were the pastor and his wife. Respected. Revered. Everyone thought they were anointed. Holy. Chosen. But behind their titles, they were tearing my soul in two. It wasn't just my body that was being used. It was my identity. My destiny. My calling. And deep down, I started to believe I deserved it. Because every time I tried to leave, something would go wrong. I'd lose money. Get sick. My relationships would fall apart. It felt like I was under a curse. And maybe I was. There's a pain deeper than betrayal. It's the pain of knowing you allowed yourself to be destroyed because you trusted the ones who said they loved you in God's name. After everything that happened with the pastor and his wife, I began to slowly shut down. Not just emotionally, spiritually. I couldn't pray anymore. I would try, but the words felt stuck in my throat. When I lifted my hands in worship, I felt dirty. Unworthy. When people fell under anointing during deliverance, I stood like stone. It was like God had gone quiet. And the more I stayed in that church, the louder my silence became. I started falling sick. Not major illnesses, just strange afflictions. Constant fatigue. Heavy dreams. Terrifying sleep paralysis. And then, I stopped seeing my period. I didn't panic at first. I thought maybe it was stress. But month after month, nothing came. I went to the hospital, they said I was fine. No issues. But in my spirit, I knew something had gone wrong. I was no longer fruitful. Not just in my body, but in every area of my life. I lost my job. The business I tried to start collapsed within 2 months. I entered a new relationship with a man who said he loved me, and he walked away without a word. Every door that once opened to me, shut. I was under something. A weight. A cloud. A judgment. And deep down, I knew where it started. I remember one night I confronted the pastor's wife. I said, "Mama, ever since all of this started, nothing is working for me." She looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sometimes God has to break us before He builds us." I wanted to scream. Because it wasn't God who had broken me. It was her. It was him. They used the name of God to violate my spirit. And the worst part, I had started believing I was cursed. I stopped going to church. I cut off from everyone. And for almost a year, I battled depression. I contemplated taking my life more than once. Because when your soul has been touched by wolves wearing collars, you begin to believe that even God is against you. But one night, while I was crying alone in my room, I whispered a prayer I hadn't prayed in months. That night was the beginning of something new. You see, I had to lose my religion to find God. Because what I was serving wasn't faith, it was fear in a holy disguise. That night, after I whispered that simple prayer, something changed. I didn't hear thunder. I didn't fall into a trance. But I felt peace. For the first time in years. Not the fake kind they shouted about on the pulpit. Not the kind wrapped in prophecies and holy oil. But the kind that sits with you in your pain and says, "I never left." I started praying again, in broken words, not tongues. I didn't shout. I didn't quote scripture. I just cried. And every night, I cried less. One day, while watching a sermon online from a preacher I had never heard of before, I heard these words, "It wasn't your fault. They used God to abuse you, but God never abused you." It felt like lightning in my chest. Because that was it, the root of my shame. I thought God was punishing me. I thought maybe I was unclean. That I had allowed everything to happen. But that day, I realized I wasn't the sinner. I was the sacrificial lamb on someone else's demonic altar. Used. Bound. But not abandoned. And I made a decision, I would stop blaming myself, and start walking toward healing. It wasn't easy. I had to cut off from everything, from the church, the leaders, even church friends. I started going to therapy. I journaled. I found small online fellowships with other women who had similar stories. And most importantly, I stopped looking for God in titles. I started looking for Him in truth. He began to rebuild me, not in a flash, but brick by brick. I learned to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because I needed to be free. I learned to confront the lies that told me I was ruined. And I learned to love again, myself first. Now I understand that just because someone holds a microphone doesn't mean they carry light. And just because someone prays in tongues doesn't mean they're not using your body for demonic exchange. Some altars are built to heal you. Others are built to drain you. And not every spiritual parent is sent by God. You see, I'm not telling this story to bring shame. I'm telling it so someone out there, like me, will wake up before it's too late. If you're trapped in any so-called relationship that leaves your spirit confused, heavy, and broken, that's not covenant. That's captivity. Run. Heal. And find God for yourself. Because the God they used against you is nothing like the real God waiting to love you.
We don't share stories like this for views. We share them for truth. If this woman's journey touched something in you, don't ignore it. Abuse wrapped in a spiritual title is still abuse. And no one deserves to walk through that kind of pain in silence. To anyone hurting, confused, or lost in church manipulation, please hear this: God is not the one who broke you. But He is the one who can heal you. For the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34 verse 18. Subscribe. Share. Help someone wake up before it's too late. This is Dangerous African Confessions HD, and we will keep exposing what's hidden until light wins.